There is a small store in rural Vermont that never mattered to anyone outside of about 4 towns. The man who ran it for years was named Hugh Schultz. He sold ammunition to deer trackers, the kind of hunters who cut a single set of prints in fresh snow and follow them through thick cover until something happens, or until the light goes. Schultz remembered exactly what those men came in and asked for. Not a brand, not a bullet weight. They wanted 35 Remington, brush cutters. That phrase, brush cutters, is the reason most American hunters today believe the .35 Remington is a dead cartridge. And here is the strange part. Those trackers were right about the rifle they carried. They were wrong about why it worked. The wrong reason is what eventually buried the cartridge's reputation. And the right reason has been sitting there in plain sight for more than 100 years, waiting for somebody to say it out loud. So this is not a video about whether a .357 lever gun can kill a deer. It obviously can, and thousands of hunters prove that every November. This is a video about a question almost nobody asks before they buy. By the end, there are 4 questions on the table. Answer them honestly, and you will know whether a .357, a .30-30, or a .35 Remington actually fits the hunting you do, not the hunting you imagine. And the reason a 120-year-old cartridge can still win that argument has almost nothing to do with power. Right now, if a hunter walks into a shop and says he wants a lever gun that is compact, easy on the shoulder, fun to shoot, and still capable in the deer woods, the answer he gets is .357 Magnum. That answer is not wrong. It is not even close to wrong. A .357 lever gun is genuinely pleasant to shoot. The recoil is mild enough that a new hunter will not flinch. Most of these rifles are short, light, and quick in the hands. In rifles built for it, the same gun will also feed .38 Special, which turns an afternoon at the range into something a person can actually afford. And the cartridge is transformed by a rifle barrel. Fired from a revolver, a .357 is a handgun round. Fired from a 16 to 20-inch barrel, that same ammunition picks up a great deal of velocity, enough that anyone who calls it just a pistol round is telling you they have not chronographed one. But notice something about that entire list. Recoil, cost of practice, handling, flexibility, ammunition you already own, a rifle you will actually take out on a Saturday when nothing is in season. Every single one of those is an ownership advantage, not a hunting advantage. The .357 lever gun did not win because it solves a deer problem. It won because it solves an ownership problem. And that matters, because ownership problems are the ones people feel every week. Deer problems happen for about 10 seconds, once or twice a season, and only if you are lucky. So the .357 earns its popularity honestly. But nearly every advantage it has arrives before you ask the rifle to do one very specific job. That job is walking into wet, dark timber in November and coming back out with a deer. Here is where it helps to know where the .357 came from. It was introduced in 1935, built on the .38 Special case, developed by Smith & Wesson with Winchester's ammunition people and a handful of outside experimenters. It was designed as a revolver cartridge, for a revolver problem, in a revolver era. That is not an insult. It is a birth certificate. Every cartridge ever made is a package of compromises, and those compromises get chosen at the moment somebody decides what the cartridge is for. A rifle barrel gives the .357 a real second life. It does not go back in time and redesign it around a medium-bore woods rifle. So the useful question is not, can a .357 kill a deer? The useful question is this: if deer in thick cover is the primary job, what am I quietly accepting in order to keep everything else the .357 does so well? Because there was another cartridge, born for a completely different reason, that never had to make that trade. In 1906, Remington introduced a rifle designed by John Moses Browning, a self-loader, the first genuinely reliable semi-automatic sporting rifle America had, sold at first simply as the Remington auto-loading rifle, and later renamed the Model 8. Browning's action was built to handle real hunting pressure, and Remington needed cartridges to match it. So the company created 4 of them at once, in 25, 30, 32, and 35 caliber, all rimless, so they would feed cleanly from a box magazine. All 4 were aimed squarely at the most popular hunting cartridge in America at the time, the 30-30 Winchester. 3 of those 4 are gone. Long gone. The 35 Remington is the only one still in commercial production, 120 years later. Think about what that means. It outlived its own family. It outlived the rifle it was designed for. It outlived the company's semi-auto ambitions entirely, and then it climbed into a Marlin lever gun and kept going. Cartridges do not survive that long on nostalgia. Something about it kept working. The .357 lever gun became a hunting rifle because shooters discovered how much a rifle barrel could do for it. The 35 Remington started life already knowing what kind of work it wanted. So what does that work actually look like? Remington's own published figures for the traditional 200-grain core-locked soft point put it around 2,080 feet per second at the muzzle, carrying roughly 1,921 foot-pounds of energy. Their lighter 150-grain load runs faster, around 2,300. Now, that energy number is not the point. It is close enough to a 30-30 that arguing about it is a waste of a good evening. The point is the shape of the envelope. At the distances most timber hunters actually shoot, nobody needs a flat trajectory at 400 yards. Nobody needs a high ballistic coefficient. Nobody needs Magnum velocity. What a hunter needs in that situation is a fairly heavy bullet of decent diameter, moving at a moderate speed, expanding reliably at close range, out of a rifle that comes to the shoulder fast and points where he is looking. The 35 Remington was assembled out of exactly those parts, on purpose, before anyone had a spreadsheet to argue with. The woods do not reward the cartridge that wins on paper at 400 yards. They reward the cartridge whose compromises disappear inside the distances you actually hunt. And there is a modern footnote here that most people miss. The 35 Remington's oldest real weakness was bullet shape. A round-nosed bullet, required by tube magazines for over a century, sheds speed quickly. Remington's traditional 200-grain load carries a ballistic coefficient of about .192. That is a bullet in a hurry to slow down. Hornady's lever evolution load, with its soft polymer tip that is safe to stack in a tube magazine, publishes a ballistic coefficient near .300 at about 2,225 feet per second. In plain English, the biggest technical complaint about this cartridge was partially solved 20 years ago, and a lot of hunters never got the memo. Which brings us back to Hugh Schultz's counter, and those trackers asking for brush cutters. Because that is the part they had backwards. The belief goes like this: big, slow, blunt bullet equals a bullet that plows through branches and still hits what you aimed at. It is a comforting idea. It is also not what testing shows. In October of 1957, Outdoor Life ran a piece called Rifles for the Brush, in which the writer set a target behind 15 feet of brush with branches up to 1.5 inches thick, and shot through it with everything from a 12-gauge slug to a .22 caliber varmint round. The 35 Remington was in that test. It showed real deflection and bullets that arrived sideways. Decades later, Outdoor Life staff writer Tyler Friel rebuilt that experiment on an Alaskan river sandbar, firing through 15 yards of live and dead willow and alder. Andrew McKean, an editor at the same magazine, had run his own version through 38 yards of willow. Friel included the .350 Legend, specifically because it is the closest modern stand-in for the 35 Remington. Those factory loads averaged roughly 6 inches of deflection, and somewhere between 60% and 70% of the bullets arrived at the far target turned sideways. His conclusion was blunt, and it is the only responsible one. You should never take your first shot through brush at an animal. Not with this cartridge, not with any of them. So the trackers were wrong about the mechanism. Their bullets were not cutting anything. But look at what they were actually doing. Short rifle, thick cover, close, fleeting shots through whatever small gap the animal gave them. Heavy bullet, Moderate speed, reliable expansion at 20 or 50 yards. They were right about every part of it, except the story they told themselves. A good woods cartridge is not one that shoots through trees. It is one that works well in the small, clear windows between them. That single sentence reorganizes the whole argument. Because if brush penetration is off the table, and it is, then woods performance is made of handling, visibility, honest shot distance, a bullet suited to the range you shoot, and a hunter disciplined enough to wait for a lane. Which means the real question was never about power at all. And that is exactly where the .357 deserves to fight back. Because for a very large number of American hunters, it is the smarter rifle to own, not the compromise. The correct answer. Consider the man whose rifle spends most of the year at the range and 2 mornings a season in the woods. Or the hunter, who genuinely flinches under recoil and knows it. Or the person teaching a teenager to shoot. Or the household, where one lever gun has to cover several rolls instead of one. For all of them, the arithmetic flips. Because the rifle you shoot confidently, and often, will outhunt a theoretically superior cartridge you barely touch. Every single time. That is not a consolation prize. That is how field marksmanship actually works. Which leads directly to the part most caliber comparisons skip entirely. Performance does not begin the moment a deer steps out. It begins months earlier. It begins with whether you can find a rifle in that chambering, whether ammunition is on the shelf in your town in October, what a box costs, and therefore how many times you were willing to practice, whether the recoil made you dread the range, whether your state's regulations even allow it. Call it ownership performance. And ownership performance happens long before terminal performance ever gets a chance to matter. For years, this was the .35 Remington's real weakness. Not ballistics, logistics. And in 2026, that story shifted. Henry Repeating Arms launched 2 new lever-action families, and the split between them is the most interesting thing any manufacturer has said about this argument in a long time. The Provider rifles, built for hunters, come in the H9, chambered in .30-30, .38-55, .360 Buckhammer, and .35 Remington. Henry's own catalog copy leans hard on that chambering, calling it a legendary woods round that carries real authority in heavy cover. The pistol caliber chamberings, .357 Magnum and .44 Magnum, sit in a separate model line entirely. Read that again. The manufacturer drew the exact line this video has been drawing. Traditional rifle cartridges for the hunting rifle. Revolver cartridges in their own family. Meanwhile, the .357 is not sitting still either. Ruger's Marlin operation reintroduced the Model 1894 in .357 in 2024, and in May of 2026 announced another new version of it. That platform has real momentum. But be careful with the good news. Ruger's Marlin 336, the rifle that carried the .35 Remington for 70 years, is currently cataloged in .30-30. No .35 Remington version has been announced. So the honest statement is this. Rifle support for the .35 Remington is returning, from essentially one maker. Ammunition is in production from more than one company, but it is not on every shelf, and it is not cheap. That is not a dead cartridge. It is also not a convenient one. Both things are true, and a hunter deserves to hear both. At which point somebody always asks the obvious question. So why not just buy a .30-30? It is a fair question, and dodging it would be dishonest. Winchester introduced the Model 1894, first in black powder chamberings. Then, in 1895, once the metallurgy was solved, came the .30 WCF, the .30-30, one of the first small-bore sporting cartridges in America, designed for smokeless powder. 130 years later, it is still here. Every gun counter has the ammunition. Every deer camp has an opinion about it. If the .357 is the generalist, and the .35 Remington is the specialist, then the .30-30 is the compromise. America already worked out before most of our grandfathers were born. It is not the underdog story. That is precisely why it belongs in the conversation. A framework that cannot recommend the boring answer is not a framework. It is a sales pitch. So, here are the 4 questions. Answer them out loud, and the rifle picks itself. Question 1. What percentage of this rifle's life is actually hunting? Be honest. Not aspirational. If the answer is mostly range time and general use, the 357 gains ground fast. If this rifle exists to hunt deer, the traditional rifle cartridges gain ground. Question 2. What do your real shot opportunities look like? Not the theoretical maximum range of the cartridge, the distance across your actual shooting lane, in your actual woods, on a gray morning. Most hunters overestimate this by a factor of 2. Walk it off in the off-season. That number is the one that matters. Question 3. Which compromise bothers you more? Recoil, cost, and flexibility point one direction. Dedicated hunting performance points another. Availability and balance point toward the middle. There is no wrong answer, only an honest one. Question 4. Can you actually practice with it? If the ammunition situation means you shoot 15 rounds a year, whatever advantage existed on paper is already gone. Those 4 questions are also on a free 1-page card you can download and take to the gun counter with you. It is the Woods Lever Gun Decision Card, comparing 357, 30-30, and 35 Remington, with the trade-offs written out plainly. The link is in the description. It costs nothing. So, does the 35 Remington make more sense than a 357 lever gun? If what you want is a lever gun, probably not. If what you want is a woods hunting rifle that happens to have a lever, the answer gets a great deal more interesting. The 357 is an excellent general-purpose lever gun. The 30-30 is the balanced, traditional answer, with a mature ecosystem behind it. And the 35 Remington is a purpose-built woods cartridge with real strengths and real inconveniences that you have to be willing to carry. Which brings us back to a counter in Vermont. Those trackers were not ballisticians. They had the mechanism completely wrong. But they had spent enough Novembers in thick cover to know what the work required, and they chose a tool that matched it. Their reasoning was folklore. Their conclusion was sound. I think that is the part worth keeping, not the myth, the instinct underneath it, that a rifle should be chosen for the specific work you are asking it to do, and not for the argument you want to win. That instinct is older than any of these cartridges. It will outlive all of them. So before the next season, ask yourself the honest version of the question. Would you rather own the cartridge that does more jobs, or the one designed around the job you actually bought the rifle to do? Tell me in the comments, and be specific about your woods.